So we're here to show you how to solve this audiobook crosses streams. We originally thought we could be pretty cheeky and just like read the solution out. Black, black, white, black, black, something weird like that. But what we'll actually do is just show you it logically, and we actually have the transcript at the top of the clues in the puzzle. One of the things that I found critical when testing this puzzle was just try to mark off conceptually what are distinct groups, potential columns, potential rows. Sometimes you're going to have things going back and forth, but a very clear thing at the start is we've got two groups that are going to shade full columns wherever they go. So imagine it's, here, something in between, and here. They can't be the same row apart, so it's not like 10 with an asterisk. That would conceptually be a broken clue, but potentially allowed in the rules. But we're going to have a 10, asterisk 10 somewhere in the grid. And so these are 3 of the 10 columns that I've just circled. And one thing to then compare with is now the other places we've got a lot of information are the start of the acrosses and the end of the acrosses. 3, 1, 3 can fit in pretty well in a single row. The 3 could bridge across the 10s. 3 could be to the left, and a 10's here, and a gap, and then a singleton, and then another 3. So I don't see as much large opportunity right at the start with this side of the clue, but I see a lot down here. 5, 2, 2 cannot be a full set in a row or column. So, because if I took 2, I take another 2, I'm too large to take the 5. And we said that these two 10 clues have to have at least 2 shaded cells down here because they fill the whole column and they're at least separated one apart. So I actually can say exactly at the start that 2, 2 is in the bottom of the grid, and we're going to have some shape like this that's going to be coming from the 10s. And now a question is like, is that far to the left or far to the right? You might have a guess just based on these 10s being far to the left, and you could count up. I think you can get as many as 5 question marks in a group, or with a 2 you can get as many as 4. But 1, 2, 3, 4, roughly 4 columns are taken to the right of these, possibly 5, possibly 6, given how those go. But the main thing is that a 5 is on the rightmost part of this row right above it, and a 5 is going to have a pretty hard space fitting in. And once we recognize actually the shape of what's coming from below is marking off an unused cell, we're going to see that we need to have a large amount of space immediately to the right. And so one reason to solve this is in pencil is just like a kind of themeless crossword. You're going to sort of learn what must be part of the puzzle, and then finally get some sure placements, and we now have some sure placements. Got this 5, we've got 10, asterisk 10. We actually get 5 question marks all in this column, so this will have mostly singletons. Particularly after we fill in this 10, you'll see it has to be exactly singletons. So we'll have single groups coming in, one sort of going out. This does need to start from a 3 and then some more, and with the 3, you'll see that we take these cells. And to fulfill this column, we actually have to efficiently pack it. You would normally have 1 point of slack in a 5 question mark row, and that first point of not using a cell is the last point of slack we actually have. So we have placed those all in the grid. We've got a 2. A 2 isn't a 1 or a 3, so we've got to put these at least at the top, and you'll see these exactly fill into the grid. And I guess I can mark that this ends in a question mark. We don't know more than that right now. This has a question mark to it. That's going to be this. It's going to need at least the asterisk. And we've got to now think about the presence of a 2, which could be in the next row. But if it is in the next row, that's going to be this cell into this cell. It actually needs to grow as much as a 3. So we've got to again bury this 2 at the very least in the space. Where can we put a 2 anywhere up here? 2 can't be here. 2 by 2 square rule, not here. Starry here would connect over. Can't be over here. The 2 has to be right in this spot. And so we actually isolate a bit of the grid. We can't immediately sort of know if there's another asterisk or not until we see that we've got to get some channel of shaded cells out of this corner. So it is going to be the case this needs an asterisk. And so we have defined the first row and second row. And now we at least need to put a 4 in the start of this row. And that's here. And mark that in, mark these unused cells. This has to stay connected so it comes down. So we need at least one more clue for this. 4 with a 2 looks to be what that is. That's over here. We're still now isolating this corner. And so let's actually see that for sure we're going to need to take this cell and the cell above it. And that's going to keep extending down. So take one more here. So we've got to take one more group to make this valid. So the first 3 rows are now marked. We've got a question mark and a question mark to start this space. That's the 2 and the 1. There's potentially another question mark and then a 4. And so if there is a question mark, which is some cells here, can we fit a 4 in as well? Well, this isn't part of a 4. So this is part of a 3rd question mark for this row, but the 4 has to pop down to the next stage. A question mark's a contiguous group, so I'm going to keep shading to the left until I get some connection point for this thing that was also being stranded. Once I mark those off, I know that group for sure. Let's now shade based on this 4. Again, the first 4 cells in this group. Going to need to have some cell over here. Got some unused. There's a little bit of trickiness just based on the counts of things, but it looks like the trickiness here, we've got to figure out how many clues are above this to allow this 2 to fit. Notice the first part of this group is a 2. The next one is a 1. If the 2 are all the way after this, we would not be able to put anything here. So there is a question mark here. And if there isn't a second question mark, the 2 would be question mark 2 would be this set. So there's at least this. And we can ask, is there a 3rd question mark in the space? But there are only 4 total cells. So there's a group, there's an unused cell in a group, and then there's a 2. There's a question mark, and potentially more. We know from this end that we have at least one more question mark. This could be 1 or 2 based on the counts in the space. It's going to be a little tricky to do too much more here, but I think it's finally time to come back to the column clues. What I see is we have 3 groups in the space, and we're going to need to take at least 2 cells coming over to the right to have this part of the grid, which right now is fully disconnected, join up to the right side of the grid. So I can know for sure that this is a 4 question mark column because I've got 3 marked, 1 more that comes in, and nothing else for it. I now then have to start with something that looks like it's got a top question mark and then a 2, and it could end there and just keep going to the right, or it could use 2 of these cells and then have another question mark. And so we're going to have to think about the total counts of things. Another sort of then consideration looks to be the only other information I actually have in this whole space. And the number of question marks will end up being important for both of these stretches, for these rows and these columns. But I think this is the very last most constraint, is finding some optimal set of ways to put these together. I still have this number, and so thinking about this number looks important. There's a mode where this whole column is just 1 question mark, which just means I just shade it all up. It's 9 tall, but that would actually mark this cell shaded, the cell unshaded, and so the very next column would have to start with a 2 at the bottom, and it actually looks to be exactly a 1 if I shade that all up. So I actually know from that deduction that a 2 has to be in this column, and it's not going to be part of this 4, and there's a group before it starts. And so coming back to the right is this deduction that question mark 2 question mark is the start of the space. I now can move over and get a little more information about these groups. This now gives me exactly 3 question marks in this column. I don't know for sure if the cell is used or not, but 1, 2, this group staying connected, this is shaded, and I now have 3 or 4 question marks here, and so I got a line somewhere like that, and I've got 1, 2, or 3, and I've got 0 or 1 here, so there's going to be some count of these things that's going to matter. I now know for sure that there's 2, 1, and 1 more question mark in this space. One of these, but not both of these, can be shaded. So there's some space where like this is 1, 2, 3, and some other space where this is 1, 2, 3. But there's some limitation on this side, but there is a far question mark on this right end to think about, trying to see which is the more limiting constraint. It feels probably this constraint is more limiting. And let's do something like this. Let's see sort of which can happen together. If there are only two groups in the space, this connects all the way down and forces 4. So 2 with 4 is the thing that happens frequently. If this is 3, 1, 2, and then this third group, 1, 2, 3, this forces frequently. So it looks like in both of the scenarios that are at play here, 6 is effectively the number of question marks in this group. And so I'm just going to sort of group those together. I don't know if they're 2 or 4 or 3 and 3, but it looks very much like question mark 2 is all I've got over here. And so I've got to fill this in like so. That forces this to be 3, and connectivity forces these to come up. So I won't mark these in, but those all look valid. So now we just have to fulfill the row side. This is 1, 2, and 3 or 4. This is 2 or 3. And this is 2 or 3. And the higher count is going to come by having this cell shaded. Actually, the highest count will be from none of these being shaded, which would be the 4, the 3, and the 3. But the minimum would come if I shaded this and this by grouping two things, and I could get one in the middle by shading any of these singly. So let's just see how many question marks we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That includes this one. That includes these two. And so 3 and 2 and 2 is a sum of 7. Anything higher on any of the rows is not. So but I think I've marked this off in a way it's not going to go. But anyway, the count has to be low, and the count being low means we have to be efficient in these shadings. So let's see if this actually works after what I'd have marked here. This would be 3 question marks like this. This is 3 question marks, which is good. And this is question mark 5, which is good. So this should have said 1 or 2. That was my error. So we got through this audiobook. Admittedly, we cheated at the start by having the written transcript, so this would have taken longer if we had to listen and write out the clues. But hope you got some sense of the really limited but elegant solving path that Grant had put into the puzzle, starting very much with the 10 out of 10 theme that he talks about and having these 3 groups separated apart. It looked very much like this footprint of having 2 2s, which splayed out this kind of shape, working with a 5, got us started there. The top rows all pack, and then we start to think about these columns, and then at the end we really just have these long stretches of question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark to work through. But we got through those in the end just fine. So hope you enjoyed this challenge, learned a little bit about how to think of unusual puzzles, and we'll see you again soon.